Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. Hi, and welcome back to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, and today we're taking a deep dive into the vagus nerve. Before we move on to talking through Pillar 3 of the Vital Spirit method, which is all about hormones and neurotransmitters, I felt it was essential to spend more time here, deepening our understanding of the vagus nerve. Why? Because hormone balance and neurotransmitter function don't exist in isolation. They're deeply tied to your nervous system's ability to regulate stress, inflammation, and gut function. If you'd like to learn more about gut health and the HPA axis and your stress response, you can go back to episodes 4 and 5 and listen to those now. Many women come to see me and they're struggling with things like low progesterone or estrogen imbalances, or maybe neurotransmitter deficiencies like low serotonin or dopamine. Their mood is off. Maybe they're struggling with sleep, anxiety, bloating. We talked about all of these in some previous episodes. And maybe they're trying everything. They're changing their diet. They're hydrating, they're taking lots of supplements, or maybe they've even seen a naturopath and they've done a gut rid protocol, but nothing seems to be working. Well, in these cases, and when patients are still feeling off and the foundations of health haven't been addressed, very often the vagus nerve is playing a role in their healing or the lack of that healing process occurring when you would have otherwise expected it to. So today we're going to talk all about the vagus nerve and why I have found this is a missing piece of so many of my patients' health puzzle. Oftentimes when a woman comes to see me and they're still feeling off, even though they've done all of the work that they think they should be doing to feel better, it's a sign that their nervous system is dysregulated. So when your nervous system is dysregulated, remember from some previous episodes, your body will prioritize survival and stress hormone production, such as cortisol, over sex hormone production. And when your vagus nerve isn't functioning properly, your gut also is not absorbing the nutrients needed to make things like neurotransmitters that help with balancing your mood and even levels of motivation to do all the things that you know are healthy and good for you. And when your body is stuck in a high cortisol fight or flight state, your HPA axis, remember your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, will actually steal resources from your body and certainly from your ability to manufacture things like sex hormones. So as we navigate perimenopause and menopause, the health of your nervous system, especially your vagus nerve, is truly key. And this is really why I don't jump into working straight on hormone protocols with patients. So sure, I might help to alleviate some symptoms, but remember back to the therapeutic order and really establishing the foundations for health and needing to be in a healing state. Well, before we're taking hormones or even taking amino acids that can help us to increase our happy, healthy hormones and neurotransmitters, we really need to look at the state of our nervous system and in particular, our vagal tone. By understanding how the vagus nerve affects every major system in your body, you'll see why this isn't just about stress reduction. It's about creating a healing state where hormones, neurotransmitters, and gut function can work in harmony. So stay with me. This deep dive into the vagus nerve will make everything we discuss in Pillar 3 even more effective and transformative on your health awakening journey. I'm going to share a couple of personal stories on why the vagus nerve became my obsession. But before I do that, I do want to introduce a case patient, an example patient. And no, this is not any of her real information. So let's talk about this case patient who had come to me and she had previously been diagnosed with SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That was diagnosed after she had been experiencing bloating and stubborn weight gain and a lot of really low mood for quite a long period of time. She was a patient who, as I worked with her, I really felt like we were hitting a wall and we were not getting some of the results that I would expect. And I started to think back to, okay, what state is this patient getting into on a daily basis? Is her body getting into a healing state? And it became really clear to me that some of the breathwork practices and some of the nervous system regulating practices just weren't quite cutting it for her. And many of the days that I checked in with her, she wasn't even able to focus on those because she just felt so awful. So I started doing research on what is something that is really accessible to patients, that patients are definitely going to do, where even if they don't feel comfortable meditating or practicing a breathwork practice or going to a yoga class or even doing yoga at home, what is something that they could be doing at home to help get regulated? And I'm not one who's much for gadgets or tech in the healing process. I think for some people, they might have their time or place, but I really wanted something that was quite simple, but also would have a profound impact. So that is occurring in my professional life, while also in my personal life, I'm having some wake up calls, let's call them, around my own nervous system. So, one event that happened a few years ago was that my dad had a stroke. And so I saw really firsthand what happens when the nervous system does lose its ability to regulate in a very extreme way. And my dad's doing great now. And I really dove down the rabbit hole of nervous system healing when he was going through that. And a lot of what I learned, I began to apply to patients. And then my daughter also has struggled herself with some focus at school and some learning challenges. And I really wanted something for her that was accessible. Again, she'll practice body scans with me or progressive relaxation. We do some meditation, but she's 9 years old, right? So I really was looking for something that she could do and even do on her own that would help to get her into a regulated healing state. And then personally, I found I had a yoga and breathwork practice, but let's go back maybe about 8 or 9 years now. I wasn't necessarily practicing every day. And I was really in the throes of professional burnout. I was struggling with some depression. I was using alcohol at the time. I don't drink now, but I was using alcohol at the time to numb myself or maybe get through some things that I kind of had to do, and maybe they'd feel a little more joyful if I was altered. And I had to get really clear with my own self and my own habits and recognize that they did not resonate with the way that I wanted to present for patients. And so, if I'm going to be regulated and help in the co regulation and holding space for patients, my own nervous system health and in particular my vagal tone was a real priority for me. So combine personal journeys with professional journeys, and I started getting trained in what's called the Safe and Sound Protocol, which we'll talk more about in just a minute. But I did want to highlight some of the reasons why this was really on my radar about a few years ago. And as a result of me really practicing what I preach, I have a daily yoga and breathwork practice today. I actually did a Vegas Fest with my friend James Maskell last year, where we had a community event all about co-regulation and learning about the vagus nerve. And I've integrated that safe and sound protocol into patient protocols with such success, because true healing really does start when we're in a healing state. So, what is the vagus nerve? The vagus nerve is your cranial nerve 10. It really is your body's built in stress regulator. It's also what I like to call the brakes of your nervous system. So, it extends from your brain stem, the base of your brain, down through your throat, down to your heart. It innervates your heart, your lungs, your digestive tract, and it has a great impact on your immune system as well. So when I'm talking about the vagus nerve as your brakes, they're your brakes to the sympathetic gas pedal. So remember your sympathetic fight or flight, that's when your foot's on the gas, your heart rate is increasing, you're getting ready to maybe run from a bear or fight it. Your breathing is more shallow and your digestion shuts down. So if you're someone who's ever experienced anxiety or panic, that is that sympathetic fight or flight activation. Whereas your vagus nerve is your parasympathetic. We've talked all about rest and digest here on the podcast. Your parasympathetic is your brakes. It's going to slow your heart rate down, it's going to deepen your breath, and it's going to stimulate digestion and healing. Now, 80% of the vagus nerve fibers send signals from your body back up to your brain. We talked about this when we were talking about the gut brain axis, which is the vagus nerve and the communication pathway between your body and your brain. And when your gut is impacted or inflamed, remember that's going to send a message to your brain that something scary or dangerous is going on. So this communication pathway is going to play a huge role in mood, inflammation, hormone balance, and obviously gut health. When we look even more specifically at what the vagus nerve controls, when we say that the vagus nerve slows your heart rate, it's doing that via your sinoatrial node or your SA node. And it's actually improving your heart rate variability. So you want more heart rate variability, which is the amount of time between beats of your heart. And it's actually a sign that you have more resilience or ability to respond to stress and then manage that stress and get back into homeostasis and out of that sympathetic fight or flight. It's also regulating your lungs and your breath. So when you have that deeper, long, slow exhale, that's actually supporting vagal tone and increasing heart rate variability. And also your gut. So your vagus nerve is so important for stimulating digestive enzyme secretion, gastric acid production, and peristalsis. So, if those things are not happening, you're not going to be breaking down your food and moving it through your body. So, remember those patients who maybe are constipated or bloated and the die-off protocol isn't working for them that you would expect. Well, it's because it doesn't have anything to do with the dysbiotic bacteria in their gut. It has way more to do with their nervous system and their vagal tone in some cases. And then your liver and your pancreas. So your vagus nerve is important for influencing insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism. Whenever we're talking about stress and cortisol, we are also talking about blood sugar regulation in my practice. And your spleen and your immune system. Your vagus nerve modulates inflammation through the acetylcholine anti-inflammatory pathways. So it's so important in controlling a healthy immune and inflammatory response in your body. And your social engagement system. So your vagus nerve actually innervates your vocal cords, your facial muscles, and even hearing sensitivity. I want to highlight the vagus nerve's role in inflammation a little bit more because we talk a lot about inflammation in my practice and ways that we can reduce inflammation. I also talk about this on Instagram because I feel like it's something that not everyone understands, but we do walk around saying things like, I feel inflamed, right? So, inflammation dampens vagal tone, and poor vagal tone increases inflammation. This is happening through the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. The vagus nerve releases acetylcholine, which tells immune cells to turn off excess inflammation. This is extremely important in patients who have chronic inflammatory processes in their body. High inflammation can also weaken vagal tone, and it will make conditions like autoimmune disease, IBS, and chronic pain much worse. Now, if you remember from our episode on Pillar 1 of the Vital Spirit Method, where we were recognizing and removing sources of inflammation, we talked about how inflammation can come from physical sources, But inflammation can also come from an unhealthy stress response. So, as we unpack that, I do want to share some information with you around how you can understand your nervous system state through the lens of something called polyvagal theory. So, in polyvagal theory, you have three states of your nervous system. You have, first of all, your ventral vagal, safe and social. I am safe. If you're not watching and you're just listening, I'm putting air quotes up. So you can just think of the mantra for this ventral vagal state as I am safe. This is the state of healing, digestion, and connection with others, or co regulation, where your nervous system is co regulating, communicating, and feeling safe with another human. It can also be a pet, a cat, or a dog. The nervous system is relaxed and engaged in this state. You're open to social interaction and creativity. You're open to working with others and communicating. And the gut is working efficiently, immune function is balanced, and hormone regulation is optimal. So, this I am safe ventral vagal state is essentially where we'd all like to be. But the real key is that we're able to move in and out of these states throughout a day and throughout our lives. The next state is the sympathetic fight or flight, or I must act. So, in this sympathetic activated state, we're mobilizing the body. We're getting ready for action. Our heart rate is increasing, our blood is pumping, we're more shallow breathing, and our digestion is shut down. We don't need to be digesting our food. We need to be using those resources for fighting or fleeing. And many of the perimenopausal and menopausal women that I see in my practice are stuck here. Many humans in general are, right? But I see a lot of women in my practice. And this is what leads to that HPA axis dysfunction that we talked about in our previous episode. This can also lead to gut dysbiosis. So if you're not digesting and moving your food through, you're giving it a chance essentially to be a breeding ground for bacteria that you might not want there. And also remember, you're reabsorbing some of those toxic estrogens. So when you're in that activated state, not only are you not making your sex hormones, not only are you not having a healthy inflammatory and immune response, but your digestion is hugely, greatly impacted. And then last, we have our dorsal vagal or shutdown freeze. I am helpless state. And this is a protective state where the body's conserving energy in response to overwhelm. So, some symptoms of that might be fatigue, brain fog, emotional numbness, chronic constipation, and immune dysfunction. You're in that shutdown, pull away state. And very often, when I explain these states to patients, it's like an aha moment to look at your stress response and even your physical experiences or health concerns through the lens of the polyvagal theory. It is extremely helpful to notice the patterns and start to acknowledge some of the nervous system states that you tend to be in. And we absolutely have behaviors and patterns that we might participate in that can help or hinder this nervous system regulation process and essentially healthy vagal tone. So, as I hinted before, I have found that the Safe and Sound protocol is a wonderful way for me to help patients get into that parasympathetic rest and digest healing state. It is a wonderful way to increase vagal tone and our ability to move in a healthy way fluidly through those nervous system states. It's normal to get dysregulated on occasion. There will be events and times and moments in life that it's actually the right thing for our body to do. It's the healthy thing for our body to do. It's the right choice that our body's making to keep us safe. So we also need to be able to come back into that regulated state once that stressor is gone. And because I was seeing so many patients unable to do that or unable to sit down and be quiet and tap into that gut intuition that we talked about in our last episode, I found the need for something external, which I don't often do with patients, but something external to help with that process. So I got certified in something called the Safe and Sound Protocol, which is based on the research of Dr. Stephen Porges. And it's a filtered music therapy that stimulates the vagus nerve to help create a feeling of felt sense or safety in the body. Remember, you have to be in a healing state to heal. And if your body does not feel safe, you will not be in that healing state. So many of my patients just simply couldn't access that ventral vagal state, I am safe, on their own. Whether it was high cortisol or trauma, chronic daily stress that kept them stuck in fight or flight, it was becoming clear to me that we needed something else to help them out. And the Safe and Sound protocol really shifts your nervous system into safety first. So it makes things like breath work or laying down quietly in a dark room and doing a castor oil pack or having a mindfulness practice work so much better, especially for patients who had historically been resistant to those practices. I have found the Safe and Sound protocol to be so beneficial for many of my patients. It can benefit perimenopausal women with cortisol dysregulation, patients with a history of trauma. So much of the research has actually been done by therapists on trauma and PTSD. And just as I mentioned, that chronic daily stress and constant HPA axis activation, that constant sympathetic fight or flight. So patients who have chronic anxiety, panic, depression, and then also individuals with gut brain axis dysfunction. So my IBS patients have done so well on the Safe and Sound protocol. Patients with ADHD or really any sort of nervous system hypersensitivity. So patients who maybe are sensitive to sound or light. And as I mentioned, it was something that I started using with my daughter. So she will sit and she'll listen to her filtered music and color. We're not great about doing it every day right now, but we have done the therapeutic listening. That's part of the protocol. And it's something that we do now to maintain balance and resilience for her nervous system. It's something that I also do as a mom to keep me from going into fight or flight. And because I choose to make really conscious choices around my nervous system regulation or dysregulation practices. So I avoid things I know will dysregulate me, like alcohol, which maybe seemed like it was calming in the moment, but for so many mental, emotional, and physical reasons, wasn't a choice that I wanted to continue to make. So I'm sure you're wondering, do you have low vagal tone? I probably should have led with this so that you weren't curious about it the whole episode so far. So, what are some signs of low vagal tone or poor vagal tone? Some signs of poor vagal tone can be chronic stress or anxiety, like we talked about, that feeling of wired but tired, right? Insomnia, difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. Digestive issues like bloating, slow motility, or IBS, brain fog, emotional numbness, social withdrawal or social anxiety, and autoimmune flares and high or chronic inflammation. These are all signs of poor vagal tone. So I'm sure you want to know how to test for your vagal tone, right? Well, we did a really fun exercise at the beginning of Vegas Fest, which I talk about in my interview that I did on James Maskell's podcast, which you can check out, The Evolution of Medicine. And one of the tests that we did was looking at the person next to you to kind of break the ice and essentially see who had ability to co-regulate or not. Of course, I prefaced it with, please only do this if you feel safe, and if you feel uncomfortable, you can come sit with me and we'll do it together. So I made sure that everyone was feeling safe before doing a somewhat awkward exercise. And then we had everyone look at each other and say, ah. And if you look into your mouth or look in a mirror, if you're looking at your own mouth, or look into a friend or a partner's mouth and they say, ah, if your uvula, your little hangy ball thing, doesn't move symmetrically, then your vagal tone might be weak. So if it doesn't just go up and down, maybe it goes to one side, then you might have low vagal tone. Heart rate variability is really the gold standard for measuring vagal tone. So if you have any devices that measure your heart rate variability, that's a good sign of healthy vagal tone. And also, I love the very simple Stanley Rosenberg Vagus Reset exercise. This is something that is in one of my favorite books on vagus nerve health. It's also something that I think Deb Dana talks about in her work. So I'll be sure to put some of this in the show notes for you. But essentially, if you put your hands behind your head, and you kind of clasp your hands behind your head as if you're going to lay back down and maybe relax and look at the clouds. And you feel your hands behind your head. You're just going to take your eyes, and without moving your head, look to the right and then you're going to look to the left. Just get used to doing this movement. As you do that, if you have your hands behind your head, you'll actually feel the muscles where your occiput is, which is where there's that little bump at the base of your skull. You'll actually feel muscles moving as you move your eyes. So just get used to that for a moment. And then again, without moving your head at all, you're just going to look to the right and stay there. And you're going to wait until you yawn or sigh. And then you'll do the same thing and look to the left. And I'll get into some more detail in another episode around other vagus reset exercises, but this is a really great one to notice. Are you able to stimulate that yawn or that relaxation response with the simple Stanley Rosenberg exercise? So let's apply what we've learned to a sample case study. So I had a woman come to see me and she was in her mid 40s and she was struggling with chronic bloating, constipation, and anxiety. She had a history of multiple rounds of antibiotic use, and that had led to some gut dysbiosis and low vagal tone. She had previously treated her SIBO, which was small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, with antibiotics and still was bloated and having gut issues after that round of treatment. So she was experiencing some fatigue along with her anxiety, brain fog, which was really contributing to the anxiety because she wasn't able to perform at the level in her daily life that she was previously. And she, if I remember correctly, had some cortisol dysregulation. She had a cortisol curve that was what I call up, down curve. And so we absolutely talked and worked on gut health. We did a lot of the things that I talked about in my episode on gut hormone health. And I spoke with her about doing things like breath work or having a mind body practice. And she was someone who said, I can't do that. I can't do that, Dr. Kelly. I trust you. Everything we've done so far has really helped me, but that's not something that I've ever been able to do. I feel really uncomfortable when I sit down and try to do a practice like that. So I introduced her to the Safe and Sound protocol. And the goal really was not only to help with her vagal tone, but to help her to feel safe and comfortable, really taking the time to get quiet, to sit with herself, sit with her body, her feelings, emotions that come up, and just be. And for so many of my patients, that is extremely difficult. And the Safe and Sound protocol was a great bridge to be able to do that. She was able to open up the app. She had already previously filled out some of the forms. So we had assessed her levels of anxiety and depression going into using the Safe and Sound protocol. That's something that I also track over time. And she would open up the app. She would pick her listening for the afternoon or evening whenever she was doing the activity. And she was able to really commit to sitting down and engaging in a mind body practice, which previously had felt completely overwhelming and daunting. And so through the Safe and Sound protocol, I was able to introduce her to very simple breathwork practices that she would do before and after and sometimes during. And the shift in her nervous system and her body's ability to heal was so profound. And so things like RID protocols or addressing dysbiosis or gut bacteria were able to work when her body was in a healing state. So after implementing the Safe and Sound protocol and helping her body get into a healing state, she had improved digestion, regular bowel movements, her bloating was gone. She had much better stress resilience, and we call it her window of tolerance was so much improved, or her threshold to getting pushed or triggered into the fight or flight state was much improved, both with her kids and in at work environments. And she said she had much better sleep. So sleep is also one of those foundations of health, right? And when we have unhealthy vagal tone or we're not able to get into that parasympathetic state, sleep is going to suffer. So all of these things had improved. And really the only thing different that we had done was adding in the Safe and Sound protocol. So, if you don't have access to the Safe and Sound protocol, what are some ways that you can activate your vagus nerve at home? Well, you guessed it, deep, slow breathing. So, we've talked in previous episodes about how long, slow exhales or diaphragmatic breathing can help to tone your vagus nerve. I think I shared box breathing with you guys last time. So, because the exhale is the most important part, I'm going to share an exercise with you today called 4-7-8 breathing. So, essentially, we will inhale for 4, hold for 7, and then exhale for 8. So, if you're ready to try it, I'll walk you through it first and then I'll do it with you. So, ready? We're going to inhale 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, hold, and exhale. So you can do that through your nose, you can do that through your mouth. Most of the time, when patients are new to the practice, it helps to exhale out of your mouth. A nice trick, if you are someone that's more prone to activation or anxiety, is that you can exhale like you're exhaling out a straw. So if you can purse your lips like you're about to sip through a straw, but instead you're going to exhale. So deep, slow breathing is a really profound way to activate your vagus nerve. Another way would be humming, chanting, and singing. So remember, the vagus nerve innervates your vocal cords. And another sign that you might have low vagal tone is if you're chronically or persistently hoarse. And so humming or chanting om, these are all ways that we're activating vagal tone. So you can sing in the shower, you can sing while you're driving. If you want, you can Google a mantra or a chant that you feel comfortable chanting, and you can walk around chanting. I'll sometimes walk around humming or singing when I know I feel a little bit dysregulated. So that's a great trick for vagal tone and healthy vagus nerve activation. And cold exposure is another one. So I'm not a huge fan of jumping into the cold river outside of my practice. I'm much more likely to be putting my bare feet on the earth for some vagal toning, but cold therapy or cold exposure does reduce inflammation and it does stimulate the vagus nerve. So even the most simplest version of that would be to just splash some cold water on your face. You can also do alternating hot cold hydrotherapy, which is a great nature cure. And you can even end your shower, your hot shower with cold water. So try 30 seconds of cold shower at the end of your hot shower for some vagal toning. And laughter and social connection. So remember, if we don't feel safe to co-regulate, to be with another's nervous system, it can be more difficult. So the Safe and Sound protocol or another vagus nerve stimulating exercise can help you to feel safe to engage in that social connection. But practicing some sort of co-regulation with a partner, with a friend, again, with a pet. These are all ways that we're enhancing our vagal tone. And even practicing gratitude. So doing something like a heart coherence practice where you breathe warmth and gratitude into your heart space. So you can breathe in the memory of a time where you felt really grateful to someone or for them doing something for you. And you can breathe that warm memory directly into your heart space. And all of that can help activate your vagus nerve. You know, I'm not going to let you get out of here without talking about yoga and movement. Really, even just gentle yoga poses, and more importantly, the breath work practice part of yoga, which is to me the biggest benefit of a yoga practice, are stimulating vagal tone and reducing stress. Yoga and movement, in particular, linking movement with breath, are also helping you to be less likely to get into that gas pedal trigger fight or flight state. So, not only is it helpful to enhance your vagal tone so that in the moment you're able to put your foot on the brakes, right? Remember, the vagus nerve is like our brakes, but you're also going to be less likely to have a car with the gas slammed down, right? You're much less likely to be in that triggered state when you have healthy vagal tone. We talked in another episode about simple poses like putting your legs up the wall and how this can also enhance vagal tone. And then last, my secret weapon, the Safe and Sound protocol that I love to use with patients. So if you struggle with a breath work, a meditation, or a yoga practice, something like the Safe and Sound protocol might be a really good fit for you. I don't want to end our conversation without talking about how your vagal tone can also be too high. And this is one of the things that really got me going down the rabbit hole of vagal tone because I was someone who actually had a vasovagal syncope. So I used to faint a lot as a little kid, not only in response to stress, but even when I would get up at school and we'd stand up to do the Pledge of Allegiance, which there probably was some orthostatic hypotension going on for me as well. But essentially, I'm someone who has struggled with a vasovagal syncope or fainting response my whole life. And while low vagal tone is often a root issue in chronic stress and gut dysfunction and perimenopausal hormone imbalances, too much vagal activation, also known as excessive parasympathetic dominance, can also create its own set of challenges. So, some of the signs of an overactive vagus nerve might be bradycardia or a slow heart rate. So, if your vagus nerve is too high, remember that message to the SA node, your heart rate can drop down excessively and you might feel dizzy or lightheaded or have some of those fainting vasovagal syncope episodes. It can also lead to low blood pressure. So, excess vagal tone can lead to what I mentioned before, that orthostatic hypotension, meaning your blood pressure drops way too quickly when you stand up. And so you might feel lightheaded or even pass out. And you can feel extreme fatigue, chronic fatigue, or lethargy, or even really low mood and depression when you're in that parasympathetic nervous system state too much. So when that parasympathetic state is dominant, you might feel chronically unmotivated and digestive slowdown. So while the vagus nerve does stimulate digestion, peristalsis, and the movement of the muscles that move food and stool through our body, excess vagal activity can also contribute to things like gastroparesis or delayed stomach emptying or even excess stomach acid production. So it's something that's always in the back of my mind when I'm working on gut health with a patient. And you really can have this feeling of numbness or disconnect when the vagus nerve is overactive. So that can cause that shutdown or dissociated state. So that is something that I'm assessing when I'm working with a patient who maybe presents with depression or hopelessness or that more shut down experience. So, what would cause excess vagal tone? So, dysautonomia or autonomic nervous system imbalances. You might have heard of conditions like POTS or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And this can involve abnormal fluctuations between parasympathetic and sympathetic dominance in those patients. And as I mentioned, that vasovagal syncope, so really just fainting and triggers a fainting response in response to stress or pain. When I would hit my nail or hit my finger with a hammer, or if I ever closed my finger in a drawer, I would always faint, just immediately faint. I remember when I lived in LA, I was walking with a friend along the ocean one day and I just dropped, passed out. They thought I had a heart attack and I had not. So it can be really overwhelming if you don't know what's going on. So you might want to look into your vagal tone if that's something that you experience. And trauma or extreme chronic stress can cause this dorsal vagal shutdown where you're in more of that hypoactive state versus reactive. So, the key takeaway really is that the goal is not just more vagal tone, but flexible vagal tone. A healthy nervous system is not one that is always calm. A healthy nervous system is not one that is obviously always heightened, right? But you should be able to shift smoothly between those states from focused alertness, that healthy sympathetic activation, to calm relaxation, more of that ventral vagal relaxation without getting stuck in either extreme. And if your vagal tone is low from some of the information I shared today, then you can work on daily vagal toning activities or exercises, breath work, for example. I have a vagal tone guide, a free vagal tone guide that you can download if you're interested. You can find that on my Instagram or on my website, drkellylivingston.com. And if your vagal tone is too high, you might want to support that with some gentle movement, definitely with hydration and really avoiding excess parasympathetic stimulation. I do find that patients who have vagal tone that's too high are really prone to wanting to kind of dissociate with a screen or numb out with TV. So just be aware of that. And if you're in more dorsal vagal shutdown, then gradually reactivating your nervous system, maybe with some more excitatory breath work if you're in a safe environment to do that. The Safe and Sound protocol is a great way to do that. And all of this can really help bring your nervous system back online and again, help with that flexibility to move in and out of each state. So, again, our key takeaway today is that nervous system flexibility, not just high vagal tone, is the key to resilience, healing, and well being. Your body is designed to move in and out of these states. And when your daily habits are helping with your nervous system and your vagal tone, then that to me is really how we create those foundations for health. We create those conditions for healing that we talked all about in the first two episodes. So, as you reflect on our conversation today, I want you to remember that all of the seeds of health that I focus on with patients, such as sleep, exercise, environment, food as medicine, stress management, mindfulness, breath work, hydration, time in nature, social connection and community, all of these seeds of health are going to impact our vagal tone and vice versa. So, if you struggle with implementing any of these, just think on vagal tone and the role that it might be playing in your health awakening journey. And please share this episode with others who you think might benefit. And you can subscribe and download and follow along so that you don't miss any episodes. And I'm so glad that you're here. I truly believe that we can change the world one regulated nervous system at a time.